everyone? Can you hear me? Is that good? All right. So this is what we're talking about today. Before you deploy code, deploy empathy. Now, I wrote this book, Deploy Empathy, focused on how to understand what people want so you know what to build. Before I was a founder, I was a product manager and did a lot of customer research to understand what are the features we should actually be building, why aren't people using the product, basically how do we make more money. And so I wrote this book, and it mostly focuses on interviewing customers to understand that. But in my own experiences, first working at an agency and then as a product manager, now running my own business, I've seen so many times that unfortunately developers do not actually have direct access to customers. I think there's sort of this, in a lot of big companies especially, there's this fear that if you put developers in front of customers, they will somehow alienate them. And I don't know if it's kind of this like fear of the nerds sort of thing, or that that they're like, oh, the developers, they're too valuable to actually have time talking to people. No, they have to be writing code the entire time. But anyway, so this book is on interviewing customers. But the skills I talk about in the book of how to understand what customers want, why they might cancel something, why they might keep using something, why they might ask you for a particular feature, these conversational skills are useful also with internal stakeholders or if you're working with clients. So if we can do a little hand raising, how many people are consultants or you work freelance, like you work with clients, you're building specific projects for clients? You can raise our hands. Okay, about half. And then how many of you work in product companies? Okay, great, another half, awesome. So here's why I'm talking about this. Your time is too valuable to spend it building things people don't need. Like, there is nothing more frustrating than spending 18 months on a project that you thought was scoped out, you had all the features, you had all the requirements, everything is going for 18 months, and then you deliver it, and they go, oh, it doesn't work. And you're like, no, it works. This is exactly what we built it to do. Yes, it works. And they're like, no, it doesn't do this. And you're like, okay, well, if we had known this 18 months ago, we could change that. Now, at this point, to have to redo this again is going to waste time and energy, and it's frustrating because as product builders, we get our satisfaction out of building things and seeing people use them. That is, in so many ways, I feel like what drives us, right, is building something for someone and helping them. And then you get to this point, and it turns out you actually had the requirements or the understanding wrong. Like, it just hurts. And so building the wrong thing, it wastes time, it wastes money and effort, and it hurts. And quite frankly, I don't want you to have to go through this. You've probably gone through this. I've gone through this, whether that was when I worked as a project manager or in a product company. Like, it just hurts to have to, scrape, whether that's a year or a week's worth of work. It's just like, why did I waste my time doing that if you didn't tell me what you needed in the first case? But the problem here is that people it's kind of difficult for them to explain what they want. The good news is there is a set of tools and conversation tactics that you can use to help pull that out of people and understand what they're actually trying to do. And the key here is using empathy. So empathy can help you build the right thing the first time. Now, it can help you collaborate also with your other coworkers. So for example, let's say you're doing a big project and you have one coworker who keeps raising questions in meetings and they're really just trying to throw things in the way of this project and they're really not feeling it, right? How can we understand why this person is getting in the way? Why are they kind of being a problem, basically? It can also help you build rapport with other stakeholders within your company or with your clients so that they feel that you really understand what they're trying to do. It can also help you get promoted, right? If you understand what the business is trying to do, you're incredibly valuable. In my time when I was working in bigger companies, the developers that we valued the most were the ones who really not only got the business, but they wanted to know about it. They wanted to understand what is the big picture and thinking beyond a specific feature or a specific project to really understand the business. But I say empathy, and people often kind of think that it's just about like being nice to people or being kind to them or just doing whatever they want, right? And That is not what we're talking about here at all. In fact, you can be a jerk to people and use empathy. I think Steve Jobs is a great example. But that's for another talk. Empathy, what we're really talking about here is cognitive empathy, right? So there's multiple kinds of empathy, but the one we're talking about here is cognitive empathy. And that is basically getting in someone else's shoes and seeing their perspective as valid, even when it differs from their own. So for example, you might be doing a project, and right now, that process takes 25 steps that someone is doing. You can understand, okay, what are all these steps they're going through? Even if it's something simple like to pay an invoice, why are they going through it? Why is it taking them so much time? And seeing where your part of it fits in there. And so even if that whole process seems incredibly inefficient and time-consuming and could be made totally more efficient with a 5-step process instead, right? So you want to dig for context, listen to them, and hold back your own judgment of what the solution or what a better process would be. And so I love using this quote. I use it basically in almost all my presentations because, I talk about empathy and we're talking about soft skills, and then you quote a former FBI chief hostage negotiator, and people are like, oh, okay, maybe this is something I should try. The beauty of empathy is that it doesn't demand you agree with the other person. So somebody could be explaining to you why we're doing this project. It's because there's this huge process they're in the middle of. That process sounds time-consuming and inefficient to you. You don't have to agree with them that that's the right way to do things. You can't change the fact that your project is at step 13 of that project, and you actually can't come in with a bomb and just blow the whole thing up and make it better, unfortunately. You don't have to agree with them. You can still listen to them and understand their context. So we use empathy to understand the whole process that's going on, whether that is one specific task they're doing or part of a larger goal that they have. Because oftentimes when we have a project we're doing, for example, working with clients, you see what you're building. And this to you looks like a whole project. And maybe this is 4 weeks or 4 years. But there's always a larger process going on behind that, right? What is this company trying to do overall? Usually, at the end of the day, it's make more money in some way. But there's all these other steps of the process. And what I love about this as somebody who runs a SaaS company and needs to understand how we move forward is that if you understand the adjacent steps, that's really where the magic is and where someone will see, wow, they really get it. Like, if you're building something amazing right in the middle there, but it turns out this step before it takes them 3 hours and it's tons of paperwork and they hate it, and you find a way to automate for them, they will love you. You haven't solved the entire process, right? You don't even have to. But if you understand those steps of the process and what they're trying to do overall, that gives you those opportunities to come in and be that sort of magical developer who makes the pain melt away. And this works even for processes that aren't linear, right? It could be a process that's happening on a regular basis. So for example, paying an invoice, or it could be on processes that just are unimaginably complicated and make no sense to you and seem incredibly inefficient. Like, what the hell is going on there? I don't know. But we don't have to say this process makes sense. It's like, okay, this is what the process is, and we're down here. How do we just make this little part better? And how do we understand this whole thing so we can make sure that the part we're building works better with the whole? Now, you might say at this point, okay, fine, that sounds great, but how do I actually do this? So if you take anything at all from this talk, is this one phrase, is, could you just give me some context? Could you give me some context behind how this idea came about when somebody comes to you with a feature request? Could you give me some context on what led to this project? Could you give me some background on how this feature fits into the big picture? And then you listen to them. Ooh. Asking for context and background. That is the key here. Now, I know we have a lot of languages in the room, right? You can use this in any language. The key here is you want to use a polite phrasing. So in English, I use could, but that might be different in your language. You want to use a phrase that gets the effect of context and background, right? Those are the two key words that you want standing out in someone's head. And you want to use phrasing about what led or how this came about. The great thing about the phrase what led is you're asking for those steps of, okay, why is it that we are migrating from COBOL to PHP? And how did this come about? You're not asking for the reasons, but you're going to get those reasons because you're going to hear that process of, okay, how this decision happened, and then what they're hoping is going to happen as a result. And it's really important that you don't use the word why. Regardless of language, don't use the word why. Why? Because, first of all, the word why causes people to come up with a narrative. It causes them to come up with reasons to justify why they are doing something, even if those reasons weren't already articulated or exist. It's almost like a spontaneous narrative building as a defense of why you're doing something. It leads to defensive,ness, and it can also sound accusatory. So the phrase, why are we building this? Even if I say that in a neutral tone of voice, or even if I say it in a very gentle, nice tone of voice, why are we building this? It still is kind of judgmental and would make you defend why you are doing something. But instead, if I say, what led to us building this feature? That's actually much more gentle. It's much easier to answer because I'm not asking for all of those reasons. And I don't even have to use a gentle voice. I can just say, what led to us building this feature? And I'm just asking you to recount all of the steps that we have gone through. How have we gotten to here? And where are we trying to go? And you can also add some padding to it, which is, can you just give me some context on why we're building this feature? I'd like to make sure we build the right thing. Simple. Or, I'm interested to learn more about what we're doing overall. Another one you can use is just, I'm curious. Putting I'm curious in front of everything really, really helps to say, I'm curious. What led to this project? And then you just listen to them. And it sounds like it almost sounds too simple, but I've had so many times when people just start talking and giving me all of this context that I never would have gotten otherwise. And you've noticed how I've said, earlier, talking about a gentle tone of voice, right? How you say something and how you treat someone as you listen to them is actually almost more important than what you say, right? Because even if I say, so can you tell me what led to this project? But then you start describing it to me and I start interrupting you and I'm not really giving you any space to talk, you're not going to believe that I actually want to know how this came about. And so maybe you forget the things about wording, maybe you forget to use your most polite phrasing. You do remember not to use why, but how you treat them after you say that matters so much. So here are the keys to listening empathetically. And actually, when I'm teaching this to people, I recommend that you try this out on your spouse or your roommate or your kids first. Don't try it on your coworkers, your clients, your customers first. Just try it out on your spouse. So for example, how did your day go today? And then just listen to them, right? Use a nice, curious tone of voice. I like to say it's like talking to a treasured grandparent of yours about a picture of them as a child, right? It's almost like they're a teacher who can teach you something. So you're being a little bit deferential. You're being respectful. Leave pauses for them to fill that are longer than you would normally pause in a conversation. Don't explain anything or get defensive. This is a really hard one for developers because if the client comes back to you and says, why is it doing this? It doesn't work. And you're like, no, we literally had a spec document 5 pages long explaining how it should work, and that's exactly how it should work. And then you start explaining everything that document said. You're missing the point, right? The point is they're telling you it doesn't work how they expected it to, or it doesn't fit into their process that it was supposed to. And so the key there is to instead say, I'm curious, can you let me know how you expected it to work? Right? Turn the question back on them and keep them talking and listen to them rather than starting to explain your own reasons. You want to summarize what they've said, mirror it as well. And a key here, if you just take away just listening to them, is also using the phrase, that makes sense. It's this magical phrase that will keep someone talking on a relevant topic. And the best part about it, we mentioned earlier of you're validating someone else's perspective and their process, even if it doesn't make sense to you, is that this is a way of agreeing with someone without actually agreeing with them. If you say, that makes sense. Seriously, just during the lunch break here, you're talking to someone, just try it, and I know we'll all sort of giggle at each other if we're all using the same phrase, but just try it when somebody's explaining anything to you, whether it's why they switched jobs or why they got a new bicycle or whatever that is. Just say, oh yeah, that makes sense. And then they will keep talking. Again, try it on your spouse. They will love it. You're probably familiar with the image of a rubber duck. And maybe on the first slide, when I showed a picture of my book, you noticed there was a duck there. It comes from the story from the pragmatic programmer that if you're having do I need to explain this all to you? You should talk to the duck. And in the process of explaining your problem to the duck, you will figure out the solution, rubber duck debugging. Well, I like to put a spin on this. That is, when you are trying to dig for context and understand, why are we building this feature? Why are we doing this project? Why is this happening? Imagine yourself as the rubber duck, right? Because the rubber duck is sitting there, it's listening to you, it's actually kind of smiling, it's reflecting back to you, right? And you are the one talking. And so I like to sort of sit there and imagine myself as the rubber duck, especially in those moments when you're prompted to get defensive or start explaining why something happened, rather than turning the conversation back over to the other person. And there's one more really important phrase that I want you to take from this. And this actually comes from doctors who have noticed that someone will go into the doctor, they'll talk to them, it seems everything is fine, they'll maybe have some small problem they have. And then at the very end of the visit, either as the patient or the doctor is reaching for the door, they will say, by the way, doctor, my entire body is covered in lumps. Should I be worried about that? Right? The real story will come out at the very end. And that's because the doctor has spent that entire meeting building rapport with the patient, feeling like they listen to them. And you can do this too when you're digging for context to understand why you should be building something. Thank you for that context. It really helps me understand what we're trying to do here. Is there anything else you think I should know? And then you wait longer than is comfortable. You let them fill the awkward silence. And this waiting is actually something I pulled from a national public radio host in the US, Terry Gross. This is the trick that she uses. When she asks a question, right? Did you feel how awkward it got on that last pause I just took? And then if we were in a conversation together, you would have just jumped in and started talking, right? And so if when you have asked someone about context, you've listened to them empathetically, you haven't interrupted them, you've made them believe that you actually care about what they're saying, you'll get a good amount of information. But I tend to find when I talk to people, whether it's an interviewing a customer or even in a sales context with a new prospect trying to understand why they're interested in us, what they're trying to do, that this is when the floodgates open. I mean, even in interviews where I felt like I was taking blood out of a stone and I just wasn't getting anything from them, this question, is there anything else you think I should know? And then waiting is so powerful. So pulling this all together, your job, yes, it's about coding, but it's not just about building stuff, right? You also need to show people that you understand what they're trying to do. Why do they want something built? What is this doing for them overall? Because your part of the project is not their goal, right? They have larger goals that they're trying to achieve. And if you can show people that you understand and care about what they're trying to do, and maybe you can even come up with other ideas for how they could do that better within the process that they have to work within, regardless of whether they want to or not, they will believe that you are someone who is a real partner with them and can help you accomplish their goals. There's amazing things that happen actually when we talk to someone else about our experience, whether this is a personal experience or a business one. There are fMRI studies of people's brains that monitor how people's brains react when they talk about their own experiences. And parts of the brain related to pleasure and enjoyment light up when people talk about their own experiences, and they don't when they listen to someone else talk about their own life. And if you can get that reaction from someone of, wow, they actually care about this experience I'm going through, even if it's something super boring like paying invoices, they will take those feelings of pleasure and enjoyment and associate them with you. And so if this person you're talking to is a stakeholder, they're gonna say, you know what? She really gets it. She's the one who should be leading that next project, right? This is the person we should be promoting because they really get the business, whatever that is. And so yes, you will get ahead by building beautiful applications and writing gorgeous code, but understanding what it is that the organization is trying to do overall and being seen as someone who will help the organization get there, that is how you get ahead. And with that, this is what I said in the beginning. So just before you deploy code, deploy empathy. Figure out what is the context behind why you're building this in the first place. What is it doing for people? What is the big picture here? And how can you figure that out? And that is how you build something right the first time. That's it.